Chapter 1. The Weight of Birth. The world pillar dominated the sky. It was the first thing people saw when they looked up from the twin planets. It loomed over the two of them, stretching endlessly into both of their skies above. Impossibly vast, its circumference nearly as wide as a moon. It connected two planets, both larger than Earth, stretching from Aurelia's golden clouds down to the smog-choked surface of its twin, Nemeris. One world gleamed in wealth and light, the other drowned in rust and darkness. On Aurelia, the capital city spread like a glass and steel web, towers spiking skyward beneath the shadow of the pillar. At its base stood a tall, blank, and seamless wall, a reminder that the pillar belonged to powers greater than the people below. High above that wall, just beneath the clouds, a windowless facility clung to the pillar like a leech. Inside, machines screamed through the sterile birthing chamber. White lights buzzed against chrome walls smeared with blood. On a metal table lay a woman, wrists bound in glowing restraints. Blonde hair clung damp to her cheeks as she turned her head, breath sharp and uneven. Her swollen belly strained beneath a wrinkled gown. She screamed and gasped for air from pain and panic. Her wrists were bound to a cold metal gurney by bioseals, leaving her unable to cradle the life being pulled from her. "She's resisting," said one of the white-suited med officers, voice clipped and mechanical. "Increase sedative." "No!" she demanded, thrashing against her bonds. "My baby isn't yours! He's not—" The child emerged, slick and crying, cradled by a doctor wearing a white suit and face mask. One of the technicians with a blue suit came over and scanned its body immediately, a green and yellow beam flicking across his bare torso. Then silence. A single beep. "No resonance," the technician announced, looking up at the doctor. "This must be a mistake." "What?" snapped Director Kale, watching through the viewing glass above the room. "The pregnancy was controlled. This experiment was supposed to be perfect." "There must have been another," the technician said, stepping back. "The child's power isn't here. It already exists, somewhere else." Kale was tall, meticulously groomed, in a pristine black uniform with every button polished. His dark hair was slicked back with a reflective sheen, as if he had used too much gel. There was no softness to his face, hard lines around his mouth, sharp eyes that never seemed to blink. There was no question who held the highest authority in the facility. Kale's face darkened. From behind the triple-layered viewing glass of the facility, he stared down at the mother as she screamed beneath the surgical lights. The child had already been taken, slid into a cryo-stabilized chamber, now en route to the genetic division deeper within the pillar's structure, exiting the facility. "We sequenced the birth and confirmed it was the intended father. But the readings are conclusive. This isn't the one," the lead geneticist had said, visibly shaken. Kale's jaw tightened. "Then that means the child we're looking for already exists, somewhere on the surface." The scientist nodded hesitantly. "It must be on Nemoris. There's nowhere else. That's where she's been for years." Kale's expression cracked deeper. He turned sharply, eyes blazing, and slammed his hand against the glass. "How long?" he shouted. "How long have you been keeping this child a secret?" His voice echoed in the observation chamber, furious and incredulous. "We monitored everything, every injection, every scan. How did this have happened without a trace?" He seethed in silence for a breath. Kale turned slowly and gave the silent signal. "Begin cleanup. Prepare the mother for interrogation. We will get the location and age of this child no matter what it takes." Below, the woman sobbed into the metal table, one wrist raw from where she'd fought the restraints. Her body trembled, not just from childbirth, but from helpless rage. They had taken her son, didn't even look at him, just scanned him like a product and moved on. Footsteps, heavy, getting closer. Her chest tightened. Breath shallow, raw. Two armored guards strode in, movements precise, faceless behind black visors. One raised a syringe, its tip catching the light. "No!" A scream ripped out of her throat before she even knew she was moving. She threw her weight sideways, shoulder crashing into a knee with a wet crack. The guard howled and toppled. The second lunged. She twisted again, bone and sinew tearing as something in her arm gave way. White, hot pain seared up to her shoulder, metallic air biting at her tongue. Her vision blurred, but she kept moving. The restraints fell loose, slick with her own blood. She wrenched free, staggering, screaming. Rage and agony tangled into one sound. She ran. Bare feet slapped the steel floor, each step echoing off chrome walls that smelled of antiseptic and iron. The facility wasn't a hospital. It was a fortress, clinging to the pillar like a tumor, and there was nowhere to go. At least, that's what everyone thought. The air shifted. Outside, the clouds above the pillar darkened. Something big was descending through the mist. Sirens began to rise in confused, overlapping tones. Motion beacons in the sky swirled as a massive silhouette broke through the shimmering clouds. "Unauthorized object approaching fast," a technician barked. Directorate White fighter-class ships launched from underwing bays along the pillar's superstructure, screaming into the sky to intercept the incoming freighter. The monolith tore through the atmosphere like a falling star, angular, matte black, and impossibly large. On its top hull, sheathed horizontally like a god's crown jewel, rested a sword unlike anything in the galaxy. The sword was absurd in size, as long as the monolith itself. The blade was sheathed within a massive magnetic groove, but at the top center, near the command deck, was its true control, a halo-like ring that circled where the hilt would be. On the inside of the ring was a large handle that shrunk in the center to fit the size of a man's hand. No transmissions came from the ship, no codes, no demands. The monolith simply kept descending. The fighters formed up in a defensive spiral, banking hard around the sky pillar's upper levels. Target locks pinged red, rails charged, missiles armed. Then something rose from the monolith. A figure rose from the front of the ship, with no means of propulsion, like gravity itself had reversed for him, a silhouette against the clouds. He reached for the ring. The moment his fingers closed around the grip, the sword detached from its sheath with a deep, vibrating hum that rippled through the clouds. It floated effortlessly in his hands. Nearly countless tons of metal obeyed his touch alone. Directorate missiles locked on. He twisted, winding up the blade. The swing ripped through the clouds, dragging wind and pressure with it. Missiles veered off course, their paths unraveling. One fighter came in too slow. The sword caught it head-on. The ship split cleanly in two. Cockpit torn from engine. Both halves spun into the clouds, trailing fire and smoke. The sky trembled, silence broken by the roar of more engines. More jets. He didn't slow. Gravity snapped forward, slingshotting him through the sky. Another lock screamed behind him. He inverted, spun. A fighter dropped in from above, railguns spinning. He lunged mid-spin. The blade carved upward in a single, thunderous stroke. Metal shrieked as the jet split apart. Wings, weapons, engines, all cleaved cleanly before erupting in a fan of burning shrapnel. Below, the monolith dipped under fire. Plasma bursts licked across its hull. Inside, a sweaty, obese 7-foot frog wrestled with the controls. His chair groaned, seemingly on the verge of collapsing beneath his weight with every violent jerk. "Bombay to Graves!" he shouted into the static. "Bombay to Graves! Hurry up and get the kid before something worse than these one-shot attack ships shows up." The only response was the noise of multiple explosions above the freighter, as several tried and failed miserably to intercept the sword wielder. Graves hurled the sword. It shot forward like a skyscraper-sized arrow, carving a deep crevice through the sea of clouds. One Directorate fighter began second-guessing if they were safe, right before the blade slammed into their vessel, tearing it apart in a burst of fire and metal, a colossal firework exploding across the sky. The sword continued its path until embedding itself deep into the side of the world pillar. It hit with such force that metal bent and screamed as a shockwave rolled out, rattling structures up and down the pillar's spine. The wielder was already in motion. In the observation chamber, Cale steadied himself against the trembling glass. Panels flickered. Consoles shuddered against their mounts. "What the hell is going on out there?" he snapped, with deeply cracked expression. Below, Lyra gasped as the chamber around her groaned. Dust sifted from the ceiling, coating her lips with the bitter taste of metal. The air reeked of ozone, sharp enough to burn her lungs. Outside, the blade wielder didn't pause. One hand now locked onto the wing of a captured fighter. He twisted mid-air and hurled it across the sky. The jet spun out, shrieking before impacting another oncoming vessel, both igniting in a burst of fire and smoke above the city. He turned back to the world pillar, resuming his fight across the sky. The blade still burned red-hot where it had struck, lodged deep in the structure's upper spine. Siren lights streaked across the facility's surface. Blast shields slid into place. His hand closed around the hilt. The impossible weight vanished. With a guttural grind of tearing steel, he ripped the blade free, sparks raining down as a section of the pillar's flank sheared away. He swept it in one final arc. Then he released it. The blade fell, and the facility below paid the price. Within its walls below, the mother ran. She was barefoot, limping through sterile halls of chrome and white paneling. Doors slammed shut ahead of her path, locking automatically under the facility's new threat protocol. She doubled back. Footsteps echoed behind her. Guards. She turned a corner and ran straight into one. He caught her by the arm mid-sprint, twisting it behind her back with brutal precision. "Got her!" he shouted, dragging her down. She struggled, wild-eyed, teeth clenched, just as one of the guards pulled out a pair of blue, glowing cuffs. The sword hit. The entire building shuddered with a booming crack that rolled through the halls. Panels burst, lights popped, and the floor lurched sideways, slamming the guards into the wall. Overhead, a pipe split with a shriek, spraying steam into the corridor. She yanked her arm free in the chaos, twisted low, and kicked off one of the guards' faces to stumble away and escape, disoriented, but back up and moving. Alarms began screaming. Red emergency lights flashed. Alarms blared. Warning displays flickered with a single urgent message. Structural instability detected. All personnel prepare for evacuation. The floor lurched beneath her as she stumbled through the smoke-filled hallway. A rumble shook the ceiling, metal buckling somewhere above. Lights flickered. A crack split the wall, and a panel blew outward in a burst of heat and sparks. A second explosion ripped open the ventilation shaft, revealing another path. She froze at the sound of footsteps, then ducked inside. A nearby pipe seared her shoulder with an audible hiss as she pushed through. Steam and smoke were bellowing out of almost every cavity in the walls. She moved quickly, one arm cradled to her ribs, her dislocated shoulder screaming with every jolt. The shaft sloped downward, curving tight, before opening into a side corridor lined with crates and wiring conduits. And shouting. Gunfire popped ahead. Short, controlled bursts. Boots scuffed. A body hit the wall. She froze, heart pounding. Her bare feet slid on the smooth floor as she crept toward the noise. Around the corner, through the shattered frame of an automatic bulkhead, she saw them. Security units, 6 in total, surrounding the lone, dark figure. She took this rare opportunity and reached her dislocated arm above her head and over her opposite shoulder to shove her shoulder back into place with an audible pop. As she looked up, she saw the man ducking under a shot, slide low, and fired twice from a compact sidearm. 2 guards dropped. He, between the next 2, used the wall as a brace and twisted behind one, grabbing his armored vest mid-motion. Gravity shifted. The guard's body launched upward, slammed into the ceiling with the force of his own weight, multiplied tenfold. The man dropped instantly, unconscious or worse. The remaining guard turned out to run. He didn't get far. The attacker lunged, caught him by the collar, and yanked downward. His boots hit the floor like he'd been dropped from a 2-story fall, making an obvious indent on the floor. His head bounced once. Still, and then silence. The hallway hung in tension. The figure lowered his weapon, breathing controlled. Smoke rose from his jacket. He hadn't seen her yet. The woman stepped out from behind a crate, eyes wide, body trembling. He turned, slowly. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, All she could do was stare at the man who had ripped through soldiers like they were nothing. He wore a matte black helmet, shaped like a reinforced biker's visor, its sleek curves broken only by faint etchings and reinforced plating around the jaw. His jacket was leather fringed along the arms, like an old-world rider's coat, but armored beneath, tailored for combat. Black sleeves tucked into scuffed, heavy combat gloves, and his boots were military-grade, thick-soled, built for violence. Beneath his jacket, his pants matched in tone and function. All black, tactical weaves, scarred and weathered. Draped over it all was a long, black cloak, ripped at the hem, wind-worn, and silent in motion. And he, expression unreadable, tilted his head slightly. "You're not who I came for," he said. She stared at him, barely upright, shoulders hunched, blood trickling from a gash at her temple. Her lips parted like she might speak, but all that came out was a rasp. Her knees buckled, catching herself against the wall. Her eyes darted toward the bodies he'd left behind with a slight sense of relief. The hallway smelled of scorched metal, ozone, and blood. She didn't understand what was happening. "Please," she mumbled, voice cracked and hoarse. It was all she could say. One hand clutched her ribs where dark bruises had spread beneath the torn fabric of her gown. Her other arm hung at her side, dislocated, useless. Her face was pale, streaked with sweat and tears, and in her eyes, nothing but fear. Her mouth trembled. "Please, not with them. I'm not—" Graves watched her, eyes sharp, still, calculating. The wall behind them groaned. A warning klaxon let out a sharp burst overhead, then another. The red lights doubled in speed. Something big was coming. The far end of the corridor came to life. The sealed bay doors whirred with energy, hydraulics clunking as pressure locks disengaged. The mother flinched and sank lower, barely able to keep upright. Her head turned toward the sound with dread she didn't have strength to voice. The door parted. Marching boots echoed in perfect rhythm. A unit of dark armored soldiers spilled through the threshold, rifles raised. Behind them came Director Cale, unhurried and calm, hands behind his back, eyes sweeping the room like a man arriving to claim something he already owned. And towering behind him, ducking just low enough to pass through the reinforced arch, came a mech suit, armored like a walking bunker, each step grinding into the floor with seismic weight. Cale smiled. "Well," he said softly, "I didn't believe it at first. But I suppose every myth wears boots eventually." He stopped, face level with Graves across the wreckage and smoke. "The Enforcer of Madrox," Cale said, savoring the name like venom on his tongue. "You must feel no shame. Is this you making up for what you've done?" Graves's voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a blade. "Where's the kid?" Cale raised an eyebrow. "Straight to business. I expected at least a glare." Graves didn't blink. Cale's smirk deepened. "Our specimen was a failure. The one you're looking for? Not here. You're chasing shadows. And 9 years of our time wasted." Cale's gaze drifted to the battered woman slumped against the wall. "That one," he added coldly. "She's our property, not your concern." Lyra glared at Cale, then turned to Graves. "I'll tell you everything I know if you get me out of here," she screamed. Cale turned to the mech pilot without another glance. "Kill him. Take the girl. We're not finished with her." Cale had barely finished his command when Graves moved. A flash of steel whipped from his belt, an ordinary throwing knife, already warped with unnatural weight from his touch. Mid-throw, Graves shifted its center of gravity behind the mech, anchoring it in space. Gravity buckled, the knife's mass swelling until it bore down with the weight of a city. It slammed into the mech's chest and ripped straight through the armor, dragging the pilot's eviscerated body within a brutal, bone-splitting path. The suit lurched onto its back, folded onto the pilot, then as fuel from the jetpack began to spray, the entire suit detonates. Flames and steel swallowed half the hallway in a blink. Cale froze, then bolted, shoving past his own men with panicked breath. "No, no!" His coat flaring behind him as he shoved past stunned guards frozen in place, disbelief written across every face. "Kill him!" he cried. The guards stood, stunned, staring at the molten wreckage of their strongest weapon. Graves didn't waste a second. He sprinted to his left, gunfire ringing out behind him, rounds pinged off walls and armor, ricocheting wildly. He dove behind the massive sword still embedded through the heart of the structure. Its titanic blade had split the facility during his descent, now jammed deep into the interior, its hilt jutting from the ceiling high above. Graves ducked behind the base of the blade's flat side, shielded by its impossible width. The sharp edge loomed meters above his head, glowing faintly from residual friction. Bullets slammed against the metal, harmless. He looked back, spotted the woman. "Grab something anchored down!" he commanded, yelling over the gunfire. She staggered, bruised and barely upright, but lunged toward the nearest wall brace. A pipe bolted through a reinforced panel, and threw her arm around it just as her knees gave out. Graves turned to the blade. He placed his hand flat against the broadside, fingers spread across the cold metal. Then, he increased its weight. There was no sound at first, no glow, just pressure. The sword's mass grew, and grew exponentially, until it weighed far more than the facility built around it. The platform groaned, beams flexed. Then everything snapped. Floor panels warped and collapsed. Walls ripped open. Machinery tore free of their mounts. The entire building began to tilt, then rip downward as gravity did what it was always meant to do, win. Steel screamed, but the sword didn't move. The blade stayed wedged in place as the entire facility suddenly fell, like the bottom had been ripped out of the world. It didn't explode. It was peeled away, like dead bark from a tree, as the sword's raw weight pulled the facility with it. And in that moment, gravity overcorrected. Everything not anchored down, weapons, crates, consoles, chairs, people, went flying upward, hurtling toward the ceiling as inertia tore the room into chaos. Guards screamed as they were flung off their feet, some smashing against bulkheads, others sailing helplessly through open corridors. Loose metal and debris spun through the air like shrapnel. The woman shrieked and held tighter to the pipe, her body almost wrenched loose. Graves stood firm, his boots locked to the floor by his own counterforce, cloak of calm in a storm of screaming violence. He didn't wait. He pivoted on the collapsing floor and sprinted toward the woman, debris swirling around him, bodies weightless and tumbling above. A beam crashed down inches from his shoulder. He ducked without slowing. She was slipping. Her grip on the pipe faltered, fingers bleeding, one arm still in pain from the quick fix. Graves reached her in a blur, snatching her around the waist just as her hand gave way. She cried out from shock and pain, but she was in his arms now, held tight against him. He didn't speak, didn't look back. He simply launched. Gravity inverted beneath him, bent to his will. He shot upward through the churning air, dodging spinning metal, severed piping, and tumbling debris. The roof yawned open above, still open from the sword's impact. His hand reached up and found the halo grip of the skyscraper-sized blade. The moment his fingers closed around it, the weight vanished, and the blade was ripped away from the descending facility. The blade tore loose with a howl, dragging steel and shattered plating with it. Sparks rained as the facility came apart below. Supports snapped, men were crushed, and the entire building spun into freefall inside the pillar's wall. But above it all, Graves rose, the sword in one hand, the woman in the other. The women's exhaustion caught her at last. Childbirth, the dislocated arm, the fight, the chaos. The rush of outside air hit her face, and she let herself slip out of consciousness. The monolith dropped through the clouds, its black hull devouring the daylight. It banked hard toward Graves, thrusters flaring blue as the top of the freighter opened. Magnetic rails along its spine hummed, arcs of energy realigning. The slot waited, seamless, made for one weapon only. Graves twisted mid-flight, still clutching her tight. The skyscraper-sized blade aligned above the channel. He released his gravity hold just long enough for the weapon's true weight to return, then guided it down with a practiced grip. Clank. The sword locked into its sheath, a vast cavity along the monolith's back. A quarter of the halo hilt rested across the roof, just above the domed cockpit. A mechanical arm snapped down, clamping the man-sized handle and pulling it into a recessed compartment near the dorsal ridge. Inside the cockpit, the compartment hissed open. The pilot-linked grip ejected onto the floor at the center deck. Bombay swiveled in his chair, beady frog eyes blinking as they landed on the unconscious woman in Graves' arm. "What the hell did you do?" Bombay sputtered, nearly falling out of his chair. You were supposed to bring back a baby, Graves, not murder some poor woman. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Shut up! Graves snarled, cutting him off. She's not dead. Leaving Bombay aghast, he carries her through a sealed door which opened, leading deeper into the monolith's inner chambers. Graves continued down a shoddy, rusty corridor with wall panels missing, exposing pipes and wiring. He walked until he stopped, to a small, dimly lit cabin, a small, five-sided room on the ship with 3 beds and overhead drawers. The color matched the hallway. It was worn, but functional. He set her down gently on one of the beds, before noticing her brow bead with sweat. Arms curled protectively over her stomach, even in sleep. He stepped back and sealed the door behind him. On the main deck, Bombay tilted his chair back to view the console, as the monolith tilted. Outside, hell approached. Waves of Directorate fighters streaked through the clouds like metal hornets, their formation wide, covering every approach vector. "Hey, Graves!" Bombay croaked, tapping a blinking proximity alert. "We've got a lot of incoming company. I think it's time to leave." Graves stepped into the cockpit silently and took his place beside the holster. Then the sky cracked. Far in the distance, a streak of light broke open in the clouds. The tearing ripple of a warp corridor ignited. From its heart emerged a colossal Directorate freighter, easily 20 times the size of the monolith, bristling with turrets, comm relays, and hull-plated insignias of power and authority. Its engines glowed like the eyes of something ancient and merciless. Bombay's throat bobbed as he stared. "Oh, crap!"